Self-confidence. We throw that word around constantly, yet most women I know, smart women, accomplished women, still haven't quite figured out what it actually means to have it. Not perform it, not fake it until it arrives. Actually have it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The version of confidence most of us were sold is wrong. It has nothing to do with thinking you're flawless, nothing to do with never doubting yourself, and certainly nothing to do with how many people in the room are looking at you. Real confidence, the kind that quietly changes the energy when you walk into a space, comes from something far less glamorous. It comes from knowing your worth when no one is applauding you, when the room is empty, when he hasn't texted back. And yet, how many of us have spent years doing the opposite? Softening our edges to make someone comfortable, pretending to agree, shrinking, adjusting, performing a version of ourselves that we think is more acceptable. There's something almost heartbreaking about it. The way women learn so early to edit themselves for someone else's consumption. A woman who has genuinely stopped doing that is remarkable. Not because she's loud about it, because she's quiet about it. She doesn't need to announce that she knows her worth. You feel it. That's what draws successful men in, by the way. And I want to be precise here, because this gets misread constantly. It's not that they want someone unattainable or emotionally cold. It's that a man who has spent years building something real, who has sat across from boardrooms full of people performing confidence they don't have, can tell the difference. He's not impressed by the performance. He's drawn to the real thing. A woman who doesn't need his validation to feel whole is paradoxically the most magnetic person in the room. There's a tension here worth sitting with. True confidence is often confused with arrogance, and the line between them is finer than most people admit. But if you look closely, the distinction is everything. Arrogance is loud because it's afraid. It needs to dominate a conversation, needs to be right, needs to be seen as superior, because underneath all of it is a quiet terror of being found ordinary. Confidence doesn't need any of that. Confidence can be wrong and not collapse. Confidence can be overlooked and not spiral. It simply is. It says, I know who I am, and I'm not waiting for your confirmation. That kind of woman doesn't chase. She doesn't bend herself into different shapes depending on who's watching. And that stillness, that groundedness, is deeply, almost disturbingly attractive to a man who has worked hard enough to recognize it. Now here's something no one tells you about building that confidence. It is not a mindset shift. It's a practice. It's behavioral. It lives in whether you say no when you mean no. Whether you leave a situation that diminishes you, even when leaving is inconvenient. It lives in how you carry yourself when you think no one significant is watching. These aren't small things. They're the architecture of who you become. The philosopher Kierkegaard said something I keep coming back to. To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. That's what confidence actually asks of you. Not perfection, not certainty, just the willingness to be fully, honestly yourself, even when that feels risky. Especially then. Independence is one of those words that gets used so casually it's almost lost its meaning. Everyone agrees it's attractive. Fewer people actually understand why. It's not about being financially self-sufficient, though that matters. It's not about not needing anyone, which is both impossible and a little sad as an aspiration. The independence that makes a woman genuinely compelling is something more interior than that. It's the ability to be fully yourself. In a relationship, out of one, pursued, not pursued, without your sense of self shifting depending on the circumstance. Think about the women you know who have that quality. They're not desperate for the relationship to work. They're not orbiting someone else's life waiting to be let in. They're busy living. They have things they care about, things they're building, conversations they'd rather be having. When they do let someone in, it's a choice. A real one, made from abundance rather than need. That difference is everything. Here's the part that trips people up. Independence doesn't mean emotional distance. It doesn't mean being unavailable or pretending you don't want love. Successful men aren't looking for someone cold or self-contained to the point of being impenetrable. What they're drawn to is a woman who is full, who has a life, a perspective, an inner world, and who chooses to share that, rather than offering herself as a blank canvas for someone else to define. A man who has built something real in his own life understands the value of autonomy. He's protective of his time, his focus, his energy, because he's had to be. When he meets a woman who operates the same way, something clicks. Not because she's playing a game or deliberately making herself scarce, but because she genuinely has her own things going on, her own direction, and she doesn't need him to give her one. That's the paradox that makes people uncomfortable. The less you need the relationship, the more desirable you become as a partner in one. Not because you're withholding yourself, but because you're whole without it. And a person who is already whole brings something entirely different to love than someone who arrives hoping to be completed. There's a damaging idea that's been romanticized for generations, the notion that needing someone deeply is the proof of love. That dependency is intimacy. But emotional dependency isn't love. It's fear wearing love's clothing. And successful men, consciously or not, can sense the difference between a woman who wants them and a woman who needs them to function. One feels like a gift. The other, eventually, feels like a weight. None of this means hardening yourself or pretending you don't feel things. Quite the opposite. True independence creates the conditions for deeper intimacy. Because when neither person is using the relationship to fill a void, what's left is two people who are genuinely choosing each other. That's rare. That's what lasts. Mystery. In an era where everyone is performing their entire life online in real time, the woman who holds something back is remarkable by default. But let me be clear about what mystery actually is, because it gets collapsed into something coy and calculated that it isn't. It's not about being elusive or withholding information strategically to keep a man off balance. That's a game, and games are exhausting and ultimately unconvincing. Real mystery is something else entirely. It's the natural result of being a complex person who doesn't feel compelled to explain herself all at once. You can't manufacture depth. You can only possess it, and then resist the urge to immediately pour all of it out for someone else's consumption. There's something we don't talk about enough. The compulsion to overshare in the early stages of attraction. It comes from a good place, usually. We want to be known. We're excited, we're nervous, and talking fills the silence. But in rushing to reveal everything, we inadvertently close off the very space that makes connection feel like discovery. And discovery is what keeps people engaged. A man who has navigated complexity his entire professional life, who has learned to read rooms, manage ambiguity, pursue what interests him, is not captivated by an open book. He's captivated by a story that keeps unfolding. Not because chapters are being withheld from him, but because the story is genuinely rich enough that it takes time to tell. Here's the part that surprises people. To be truly mysterious, you have to know yourself completely. That's the paradox. Insecurity makes people overshare. We flood the space with information because we're afraid of what the silence might say. But a woman who is deeply comfortable with herself doesn't feel that pressure. She can let the silence breathe. She can leave space. She can let him be curious. This is different from emotional unavailability. A mysterious woman is warm, engaged, genuinely interested in the people she's with. She's present. She just doesn't narrate herself constantly. She doesn't offer explanations for who she is or why she made every decision that led her here. She lets her life speak for itself gradually and lets the people who matter earn their way into understanding her. What this creates, when done naturally, without calculation, is a relationship that has room to grow. When everything is revealed in the first few weeks, there's nowhere to go. But when two people are discovering each other over time, each layer of understanding feels earned. That's not just more exciting, it's more real. The risk, of course, is tipping into distance, and that line requires honest self-awareness. Mystery stops working and starts doing damage when it becomes a wall rather than a depth. The goal was never to keep him out. It was to make the journey in worth something. Somewhere along the way, women were taught that the path to being loved was through accommodation. Say yes. Be available. Make it easy. Don't rock the boat. Don't ask for too much. And there are men, plenty of them, for whom that arrangement works fine. But a successful man, a man who has spent years navigating genuine challenge, who who has earned his position by not folding under pressure, who is surrounded daily by people performing competence they don't have. That man is not drawn to easy. He's drawn to real. He's drawn to a woman who has standards, holds them, and doesn't quietly abandon them the moment there's social friction. This is what being a challenging woman actually means, and I want to reclaim that phrase because it tends to be misunderstood. It doesn't mean being difficult. It doesn't mean manufacturing conflict or making a man chase you until he's exhausted. It means being a woman who respects herself enough to require the same respect in return. That's it. That's the whole thing. But the implications of it are enormous. When you hold a boundary, a real one, not a test, not a tactic, you communicate something profound. I have a life, a set of values, and a sense of what I will and won't accept. And that doesn't change based on how much I like you. For a man who operates the same way in every other area of his life, this is not threatening. It's deeply familiar. It's the language of self-respect, and he speaks it fluently. What he doesn't respect, even if he can't always articulate it, is the woman who abandons herself, who agrees when she doesn't agree, who makes herself smaller to avoid conflict, who swallows her own needs and calls it love. Not because he's cruel, but because at some level, he can feel it. And a relationship built on one person's chronic self-erasure doesn't create safety. It creates an imbalance that slowly poisons everything. Here's the harder truth. The women who try the hardest to please, who give the most, accommodate the most, bend the most, often end up with the least respect. Not because the men they're with are terrible, but because you cannot genuinely admire what you've never seen hold its ground. The other dimension of challenge that doesn't get discussed enough is intellectual. Successful men are almost universally people who live inside their minds. They're drawn to conversations that go somewhere, to perspectives that make them reconsider something, to a woman who doesn't just listen but responds, who has something of her own to bring to the exchange. They don't want someone to agree with everything they say. Agreement without thought is just a mirror, and eventually a mirror becomes boring. A woman who can disagree with intelligence, hold a position with grace, and engage without either backing down unnecessarily or turning every difference of opinion into a conflict. That woman is genuinely rare. And rare things don't get taken for granted. This doesn't mean challenging for sport. It means being so clear about your own values and perspectives that you can't help but bring them to the table. It means being a whole person in the conversation, not a supporting character in someone else's story. So what does all of this actually look like, put together, in a real relationship? The ideal partner for a successful man isn't a fantasy. She isn't perfect. She isn't always composed, always certain, always right. But she is whole. She has a life she's built, a sense of who she is, and the kind of quiet self-respect that doesn't require constant tending. She brings something to the relationship, intellectually, emotionally, in the way she sees the world. Not because she's trying to add value, but because she genuinely has it. She supports him. Genuinely, not strategically. She understands what it costs to build something, because she's doing it herself. She doesn't need to be the center of everything, and she doesn't resent the ambition in him, because she carries her own. She doesn't erase herself in the process of loving him. That might be the most important thing. The women who are truly admired, who are introduced with real pride rather than just presented, they remain themselves inside the relationship. He knows who he's with. He can feel the solidity of her. And that solidity is what makes him feel safe. He doesn't want a woman who worships him. He wants one who sees him, his actual self, the fears behind the accomplishments, the person underneath the position, and chooses him anyway. That kind of being seen requires a woman who is secure enough in herself to look clearly, without projecting and without flinching. And in return, she asks for the same. Not as a demand, as a quiet, unshakable standard. This is what I offer, and this is what I require. Not from a place of calculation, but from genuine self-knowledge. That woman doesn't need to be perfect. She needs to be present, in her own life, in her own skin, in the relationship she's chosen to be in. She is the woman he introduces not because she fits a mold, but because she is unmistakably herself. And that, more than anything else, is what he's proud to stand beside.